This episode of A Conversation with John Conenna is sponsored by Generate. In today's digital age, staying ahead means harnessing the power of generative AI. Wondering how your small or medium-sized business can join this revolution? Look no further than Generate, your strategic partner for integrating cutting-edge generative AI solutions. We create personalized plans, adapting existing AI technologies to fit your specific business needs. Plus, our expert team provides essential training, empowering you to make the most of these innovative technologies. Interested in transforming your business with AI? Reach out to us at generateteam@gmail.com. That's generate, GENERAIT, team@gmail.com. And now, on with the episode.
Good evening and welcome to another edition of A Conversation with John Conenna. Tonight is a special one for me because we go back to the world of hockey, the world that I love, and it goes back to a legendary defenseman who we're going to tonight bring back his memory and back to life. Tonight, we have on the son of the legendary defenseman number 3, Pierre Pilote, the son of Pierre Pilote, who's also Pierre Pilote, and of course, the award-winning author, David Dupuis. And David, of course, is known for the book in 1998, the Sawchuck, The Troubles and Triumphs of the World's Greatest Goalie, that he wrote in 1998, and then the remake that we had the interview with him about a little over maybe 7 months ago.
Yeah.
Of course, he's also the author of the book about the Red Kelly story, which came out in 2016. He is on with the genre of the 7 Keys of Hildegard that is just phenomenal, and we'll be seeing him about that. But tonight is special because, like I said, we have Pierre Pilote on, the son of Pierre Pilote, and this great book about the legendary defenseman who patrolled the ice in the Chicago Stadium from 1955 to 1968. And big mistake by the Hawks to let him go in 68, but from 55 to 68, the Heart of the BlackHawks, the Pierre Pilote story by Waxy Grigori and David Dupuis. And here it is, the cover of the book, a fantastic read. And no one has ever forgotten about Pierre. This book and some of the pictures that are in this book of the family and everything else are just phenomenal.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, good evening and welcome. Pierre, I'll start with you. How's it going with you, young man, before we get to David and just unbelievable stories about your father to tell?
Well, first off, thanks for having me on, and everything's good here. Yeah, it's always nice to chat about my father, and it's always nice to know he's been appreciated, I suppose. Yeah.
Oh, God. Legendary here still in Chicago, especially when you used to go back in the old building and even in the new building with that number 3 hanging in the rafter. David, great to see you again tonight.
John. Yes.
And loved when you answered the email, of course, and then I loved it even more when you said that Pierre would be on with us. I have to ask both of you. I'll ask David to start. When does this start to write the book about this great defenseman and this great man? Do you remember between you, the families, Pierre, how did this get going? And of course, at that time, as we were talking before we came on, Pierre was still alive at that time.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. I met Pierre when I interviewed him for the Sawchuck book back in 1996. And I had heard he had moved nearby me, about 15 minutes away. So I called him and said, hey, can I interview you I'm doing a book on Terry Sawchuck? He said, sure, come on over. And I'll never forget it because I no sooner walked in, he had just moved into his new house in Wyvale, Ontario. And I walked in and he said, don't sit down. I says, oh? He says, you're going to earn your interview today, Mr. Dupuis. I went, really?
Whoa.
He says, you see that couch right there? I said, yep. He says, me and you are carrying it to the basement. and he put me on the bottom. And I carried it down to the basement together. And then right from that get-go, we became friends. We had a good interview about Terry Sawchuck and the great series against the Hawks in '67,
Oh,
and we became buddies ever since then. And then years went by, we were friends and always in contact, either once or every second week, a call or a visit or something.
wow.
And then by this time, I was good friends with Waxy Grigware, who would help with the book. He's a researcher extraordinaire, and he became friends with Pierre. And then we would nudge him now and then to say, because Waxy and I had both done other books, history books and stuff.
Sure.
And Pierre, I had done the Sawchuk book, and then he says, a book about me. Who would want to read that? That's going to be. I have a boring life. Well, I wasn't going to argue with him. It took years, and then finally, the book came out in 13. So I'd say around 2010.
Okay.
Finally said, "Okay, let's you stop bugging me about it. Let's do it." And
Hey, I
we
hate
got
to
a
interrupt.
publisher.
I hate to interrupt you,
Yeah.
Dave, but he probably had all his furniture moved around at that point, eh?
That's what
Pierre-
it was.
Pierre, I gotta ask,
Sorry.
I gotta ask you, Pierre, did you know when this was going on, did he say, hey, there's a chance that they
Yeah.
might want to write a book about me? How was he about stuff like that? I mean, because like I said, when I met him the one day, and of course, just seeing him, the personality, you could just, that he was, he wanted to talk. He wasn't shy about talking. How did he feel about that this could happen?
No, not at all. He's not afraid about talking at all, but he was a little shy about putting it in print, I think.
Yeah.
That's probably why it took a while. He did run it by us a couple of times, and we were all like, yeah, why not? The kids, right? Us kids.
Sure.
And at the end of the day, he was really happy that his story got at least put in print. You know what I mean? That he
Sure.
told his story, so so it was a good process. And of course, he got all his furniture moved.
Right. Exactly. I'm going to stay on you for just a minute here, Pierre. Does he talk to you guys, as of course, growing up as, a family member, a son? Does he talk to the family and say how this, hockey life was? Because David and I have gone over this a few times. I mean, that original six, to make an original six for me is, my son and I debated every day, and I says, listen, this is a watered down thing. I go, to make a team of six teams, you had to be good. You had to be great. Forget good. Does he talk? I noticed, reading the book, he went through some hardships, correct?
Oh, sure, yeah. It was a different time then. Training, of course, was so different and that. But he'd set goals for himself, right? Like he took up hockey late in life and then said, well, okay, all right. Or late as a juvenile, right? 16 years old. And started setting goals for himself and started obtaining them and just moved along from there. And that continued right through life, so he was driven that way. And,
Yeah, he had the passion for it, correct?
For a lot of things, like whether it was hockey was his first, obviously,
Sure.
and as Dave, I was like going back through the book a little bit, and yeah, he was in business, those last 4 or 5 years as a hawk. He was already investing in car dealerships and laundromats and things like that. Now, mind you, they pretty well had to have a second job.
I read a lot of stories
back then. Yeah,
Sure.
so there was no pensions and stuff going, at that time. So
he was already preparing himself for the life after.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Sure. David, I want to go to you. I have to ask you this question. Just like a Sawchuk, which again, phenomenal. The two books, as you know how I feel about them. when you find somebody like a Pierre Pilote, of course, you and Waxy with doing this book, did you find that, wow, what a guy this Pilote was and what he went through and how he got to the level that he got to, this legendary Hall of Fame defenseman.
Well, he didn't play hockey till he was 17.
17.
17. I
Wow.
mean, he played in his first year he played hockey. He was in a beer league in Fort Erie.
Right.
And it just so happened the junior B team, they were renting the ice over in Buffalo. And the junior B team, the Cataracts, were having a practice. And Pierre, one thing about Pierre, he was not afraid of trying or doing anything. He had
Yeah.
what would you call? I don't want to say the term, but nothing. He didn't hesitate about anything, whether it was naivete or just gumption. But he goes to the coach and says, it's the end of the junior B season. And he says, can I have a tryout? Me and my buddies are with me. And the coach says, yeah, sure. So he got on the ice and I think he scored 3 or 4 goals in the scrimmage. And
Wow.
they weren't I mean, it was the end of the season, so they weren't looking for anybody, but he remembered him for the next season. And to think that from there he jumped into junior A with the St. Catharines Teepees.
Right.
I recall he didn't know how to skate backward. Players were getting around him, so he got a lot of penalties because he would stop them any way he could. But he
Sure.
didn't. They had to teach him at that level, junior A. They had to teach him how to skate backward. He had never
Sure.
been taught. Of course, he only been playing hockey 2 years, and so there was nothing. He always said he looked at somebody and watched and learned, and he was
Yeah.
a baseball player as well. And before he got playing hockey, and he watched and he learned. I think he was the greatest study. You give him a study of anything, hey Pierre, and he learned it.
Wow.
Yeah.
And he's born in, tell me if I'm pronouncing it wrong, in Kangami, Quebec, right?
Kenogami.
Quebec,
yeah.
yeah.
Yes.
Right. Wow.
Yes, a lumber town.
Lumberton, tremendous, the late start. And then, of course, not knowing how to skate ever to become this legendary defenseman. A lot of people said that even Orr had this thing, Bobby Orr, if we had to compare, because I look at Pierre in those days and Doug Harvey as the gentlemen that were, before Orr, the legendary players. But they said that Orr had his issues without, that he couldn't skate backwards that well.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, Pierre was amazing. And I remember another thing that separates the greats from anybody else. I was reading that his 3rd year in Buffalo, he played for the Buffalo Bisons in the NHL before going to the NHL. And he had a eureka moment. All of a sudden, it was at a practice and he was skating towards the puck. And all of a sudden he stopped and realized, no, I think the best play is for the guy chasing me, my forward, let him get the puck. And he said that eureka moment happened where all of a sudden he saw the whole ice. You have the Orrs and the Gretzkys and the Crosbys who just have an instinct, can almost see the play before it starts and just knows what is going to happen. And he said that was his eureka moment, that all of a sudden the game for him became easy. He could see plays develop. And he talked about that was one of the greatest moments in his hockey career was at a practice where he said, wow, I could see the play develop and I almost know what's going to happen before it happens.
Wow. And again, being a defenseman, what a attribute to have, to see the ice. Pierre, the book, of course, that David and Waxy wrote, 22 chapters. So there's a lot. There's a lot here to talk about when we talk. I was fascinated with the Hey Muldoon, get out of here. The curse, he's just like the Rocket. I had to go back and look myself. Pierre, does he talk? We'll just jump ahead a little bit. after retirement, the BlackHawk years, what from 55 to 68, what goes through his mind about that whole organization?
You mean after he retired? Like,
Yeah, pretty much. I mean,
yeah,
did he talk, or even during his
yeah.
playing days when you were younger, of course?
Yeah,
Was he
well,
one to bring the game home?
no, he didn't. He was well, he was pretty serious. Like, he there wasn't too much. I mean, he was fun to be around, but
Yeah,
he was very dedicated. Like back then, he'd eat his steak right at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and then have a nap, and then go play. That was his routine. And a funny little anecdote to that is he never drank water on the bench.
None
He
of them
never
really?
did.
hydrated himself.
None of them did.
Yeah,
Yeah,
none of them did. They believed that they'd get cramps then, right? So even when I played, like, don't be drinking the water, you'll just get a cramp, But anyways, but he uh there was always players around, like friends would be popping in, whether it be Bobby Hall, Kenny Warm, other wives would be hanging around with my mom. It was a real family sort of thing, and back then, um, I was um, during hockey games. I actually used to sit in between the Hawk bench and the visitors bench.
okay.
There was back in the day, there was like 2 rows of 5, and I used to sit in there, in my suit and trench coat and fedora, like as a 8-year-old, 9-year-old kid, and watch the game from there. And literally, my dad was like 2 feet away at the end, going in out of the bench there. So
Wow.
that's where I learned the game from too, right? And but so I saw his triumphs and defeats firsthand myself, being at the rink, and injuries and fights, and the whole thing, the thunder in the stadium, and of course the organ,
Oh, yeah.
and all that. So I from my perspective, it was obviously really
Fantastic.
pretty cool. I mean, but that's how I grew up. I didn't know any different, right?
Exactly. And
yeah,
what a way to grow up in the old
yeah,
Chicago Stadium,
yeah,
because
yeah,
it was
right, yeah,
it was electric. It was
yeah.
electric
It
then.
it really was. And when I went to my first Leaf game when he got traded, I was like, "What's going on here?" It was really quiet, and then you get a "Go Leafs Go" chant going or something. But no, the stadium was just
Oh,
so much power, right? There, and then it was really laid back in Maple Leaf Gardens, like you know,
I and both correct you both can correct me if I'm wrong. I went to a game in Montreal once, and I went to a game. I'd never been to the old Maple Leaf Gardens, but I'll
mhm.
remember I felt like I was in a religious
Oh well,
place.
yeah,
You know,
yeah,
I'll never forget. I'm
yeah.
in Montreal. It was the last year of the Forum in 1993. Real quick
Oh
story.
really? Eh?
And I
Yeah.
was talking during the Canadian national anthem, and some Frenchman
Oh.
turns around and says, "Shut up already."
Oh yeah.
Where
Yeah.
in the Chicago Stadium, we're throwing beer in the first period. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
I got to go back to David for a sec. Dave, again, the chapters in the book and how it went with Pierre, and of course, to cover this great career you and Waxy did here. What was he free flowing when you say, "Hey, right, we started this in 2010"? I mean, we're at the point where it was a smooth transition for him to help you really a lot with the book? This is just unbelievable. And of course, it's coming from Pierre, which I love.
Yeah, yeah. No, he counted on us to be organized, and I'd done a book before, so between the research and of course, we went down to his basement and he got the boxes out, and there were boxes of articles, tons of pictures, and that was before even interviewing him. I think we interviewed him for maybe 50 hours, 60 hours. So we had the questions all lined up, and I could, because he was close by, I could call him 10 times a day as I was writing. Well, actually,
Right.
it's the research, I did the writing, and ask him right on the spot, this or that or whatever. So he was completely open. And then, uh, it was fun to go see. We went to, Bobby Hull was nearby at an event. So we went and spent the morning with Bobby at his agent's house, the other side of Collingwood near here. And so it was neat to see them together, shooting the breeze and laughing and sharing memories. Do you remember this, Pierre? Do you remember that? Because Bobby,
Oh, wow.
of course, as Pierre will know, Bobby Hull was quite a character.
Oh, yeah,
So Pierre
that's
would
for
have the
sure.
stories more than me.
I imagine, yeah, that would have been great for you. Hey, even I meant to mention this when you were asking David about the process. He's he became really good friends with my dad, right? Like you and my mom, right? Like
Yes.
you and
Right.
Waxy are, they became real good friends and were involved with your Midland Hall of Fame. Oh, they
Sports
got
Hall
a
of Fame.
great hall for
Sure.
a small little town. They got a great hockey Hall of Fame up there, and that. So, um, uh, from my end, I was just glad that David was like kind of moving all the furniture around.
Yeah, it was- oh,
Yes.
geez.
Yes.
I appeared. Did you live in Berwyn for a short time?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes,
and I
we.
have to tell you why I bring up Berwyn, David and Pierre.
Yeah.
So there's another two gentlemen that I interviewed. It's called Carl and Tony Ruzicka. They were twins in Berwyn, and they wrote a great book. And Pierre's in this book. It's
Okay.
called The Twins: A Journey of a Lifetime. And they one day rang where you guys lived there in Berwyn, a famous town where a lot of Blackhawks live. And they rang the bell, and Pierre answered the door, and they introduced themselves. And about 5 minutes later, your dad and Pierre Pilote fashion said, "You want to meet Glenn Hall?" And they
Really, eh?
almost like jumped out of their chair.
Yeah.
But just to mention them, they were big fans. Of course, Mackey lived there for a short time. Chico
Yeah.
Mackey, Pierre Pilote, and I think maybe Warren was there, and Phil Esposito for a short time when he was a Blackhawk. So I had to bring them up because I had told them that I was going to interview David, and I go, there's a chance we might get Pierre Pilote's son on there. Did you go to
Yeah.
school in Berwyn, Pierre?
Yes, I think I did. Now, if I remember correctly, I think this Berwyn, because we live Cicero, uh, uh, Berwyn, Oak Park, Maywood was the
Yes.
last, but Berwyn, there was a school right across the street, and I think I went to school there. And if I remember, it was might have been a duplex, an old like probably 1920s bungalow duplex sort of
Yes.
thing. And it was that be the area we used to hear sonic booms all the time from the aircraft. Was there an Air Force base around there?
The closest airport there was Midway Airport at that time, Chicago Midway.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because we used to hear that, but I went to school right across the street. I might have been
Wow.
grade 1 or 2 then, around then, and then I think we moved to like Broadview.
Yeah,
near,
Broadview. That was another suburb here.
Yeah, Oak
Not
Park
too-
was. I remember quite a bit. I remember we lived right on Carpenter Street.
Yeah,
So,
wow.
and we had the alleys in the back there. Yeah. Playing
David,
hockey and skating on the streets there in the winter.
oh yeah, we had some
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
very cold winters. I'm going to come back to you with a question, Pierre.
Yep.
But David, I got to ask you. I mean, during the time with the book again, could you see the passion coming out in Pierre Pilote #3?
He was actually, we would have sometimes to pull stuff out of him because he could be very modest. He was very always proud of everything he did, and he's very, very, very competitive. But just like that attitude he had in the beginning to say, well, who would want to read my story, like, and so there were times we had to pull stuff out of him, but there were times it was like rolling. I mean, he would get going
Sure.
and You know, he especially loved talking about uh, how Bobby Hall became the Golden Jet. You know, they had ended a season out of the playoffs, so the New York Rangers did a tour of Europe playing against Boston, and so the Rangers got Bobby Hall, Pierre, and I think uh, their captain.
Was it it wasn't Howell, was it?
No, no, the
With
hot
Chicago,
yes,
Litzenberger.
Litzenberger.
Oh, Ed Litzenberger, yes.
They
Yes.
went to play with the Rangers as they did this European tour, and he said it was there that Bobby and he, because Pierre liked to rush, so it was on that tour that he and Bobby. He says that's where I saw the Golden Jet come out. Uh, they started to give and give, give and go, give and go, give and go between him and Bobby up the ice all the time, and that's right at that in that series in Europe is where Bobby really took off. And when he came back for that fall to start the next season with the Hawks, Bobby was flying. That's where he came out of his I wouldn't say shell, but he just exploded and became the Golden Jet.
Yeah. Oh,
That's really interesting that you say that. You might, because I've, my father told me that that's when he felt he started playing the best
Yes.
as well.
Wow.
So
Yes.
to pair the both of them together, because as the story goes, him and Bobby were really tight on the ice,
Yes.
right? You know, and that's probably the main reason why Bobby, Dave, you know this, gave my father his 48th goal puck. Right when Bobby first got 50 goals, he gave him his 48th puck. You know, for my dad assisted on it or something like that, right? And so he has it bronze, had it bronze.
Oh wow. I have to tell you something.
That story continues, John.
Yes.
The bread hole.
The bread, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, all right. So I'll tell you the rest of the story.
Yeah,
So
Go ahead. Go ahead.
got this puck. It's the 48th goal puck, right? And that's really cool. And it's a good story behind it. Well, don't you know, in 91, I was going to Chicago with a friend of mine to see the blues, a blues festival there, right, in June. And my buddy says, hey, what would happen if we ever bumped into Bobby Hall? 30 seconds later, Bobby comes walking into the into the bar. Hey, how's it going, boys? And hey, Bobby, how you doing? And he recognized me. How you doing? How's your mom? And all this and that. And I go, well, that's what he would do. Anyways, he goes, I got something. If I give it to you, you promise not to lose it. And I go, yeah, sure. So he goes on the plane and he comes back with his bubble wrap and inside is a puck. And he says, your old man and I, we were tight as ticks, eh? Like, yeah, he used to feed me the puck all the time, right? He says, and I gave him my 48th puck. And I says, yeah, I know. I says, well, you know what? He called me up at 3 a.m. One night and said, hey, you think you can get me Brett's 48th? And then so there it was. He had it autographed by Brett Hall, and then he gave it to me on the plane. So it was a real interesting story that I then in turn gave it to him. Right?
Yeah.
I have to tell you real
They had
quick.
it mounted on a nice board.
Oh wow.
The two pucks beside each other.
That's
pretty cool.
Hall would have those crazy rushes where he would pick up the puck behind the net. And there was an ESPN film where they're talking to like snippets of all the different players. And they talked to Pierre on this ESPN film. And they said, Pierre would always say, Bobby, let me just touch it before you pick it up. So I get an assist. That was one of my favorites.
Yeah.
Pierre, what was the first game or that first season that you remember did? Do you remember in Chicago where you kind of now like, wow, I can remember this even from how we're talking tonight? What was that first season?
Yeah, I remember actually my earliest. Well, I remember especially on TV, WGN, right?
Yes.
Back in Channel 9.
Channel
I
9.
remember watching in black and white when they went on the road, right? So we'd watch there. My mom would be ironing, and I'd be watching, and I used to watch the games. And of course, that was my earliest recollection, except when I think in '62 they went to Montreal and they lost in Game 7, and so they were pretty disappointed then. And I do remember that. Like my mom went. We're going to bring back the Stanley Cup. It didn't happen, so that's sort of my earliest recollection. But after that, I was, because '57, I was only 4 or 5 years old then, right?
Wow,
So,
wow.
so
David, what did you get out of Pierre when it came that time when, of course, the Blackhawks made the trade with Toronto? Was he, how was he before I go back to Pierre? Was he bitter? Was he
He,
sad? Or I shouldn't use the word sad.
yeah, I'd say he was sad. He was mad about the way it was told. It was told by a reporter, and that upset him the most. That none of the Hawk brass had the guts to call and tell him that it was going to happen. So that was his. He was pretty angry about that, and going to Toronto was like a shock after being in Chicago all those years. They were like family, right? And to go to Toronto, and he was enemy. They were enemies in the '60s. Those
Yes.
rivalries, all those teams.
oh yeah,
You walked on the other side of the sidewalk if you met one, and someone from the other team. So all of a sudden he's with Toronto, and he said very early on, with for example with Bobby, it would be give and go. He'd give Bobby the puck, Bobby give it back. Toronto in the early months, he felt alone because he would be on the ice and he would give, say, Mike Walton the puck, and so that he'd take off and Mike Walton wouldn't give it back to him.
Okay.
Or the same way if he had a play with George Armstrong and he gave George Armstrong the puck and he didn't take off expecting it to come back, well, George Armstrong would pass it where he would have been. They played games with him at first, and it was his real inclination about, I'm not enjoying it this year in Toronto. And he started looking at starting a luggage company. And it was clear that in my time, I'm not going to do another season here. Emil Francis tried to get him to come to New
Yes,
York.
I read that in the book about Emil.
Yeah.
Yes.
And no,
Yeah.
he had started his luggage company and he was dead set on not going. So Toronto was not good for him. No.
Yeah. Pierre, could you see what David's talking about when you guys went to Toronto?
oh yeah, 100%. That was probably the first time I saw my dad really, reflect. Excuse me. Like thinking. Like when he got word that he got traded, we were still in
Sure.
Chicago, and I know that he wasn't happy about it, and he told me later on. He says, of all teams, Toronto, at the time, because they used to beat up on each other back then. There's old games that they show, occasionally on Vintage Hockey or something like that. You
Yes.
see some of those games. Oh
All fights.
man, like yeah, hey, the fights and the stuff
I
that
see
went
that
on.
on Leaf Classics with the old
Yeah.
Joe Owen. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, So yeah, he was disappointed, and I knew he didn't have to tell me. I knew that was his last year. He was going to retire. I knew it. He got, like Dave says, he got involved in the luggage business and was doing well with that, and that's where all his energies and his focus went. Like, he says, okay, I'm done with hockey. I'll get through this. And then he was always forward thinking that way, right?
But like when he
Yeah.
retired, I read in the book, I mean, he was done. He was done. He knew
Yeah.
that was it. It was over and he walked away from it. How was it? I'll ask David the question, then I want you to answer. How was it when the Hall came coming in 1975, the Hockey Hall of Fame?
Hockey Hall of Fame. I think he thought it was a great moment. He didn't talk about it as much, but you get those old guys when they sign their name, it's always number 375, Pierre Pilote. It's if Terry Sawchuk had been alive, would have been
Excuse me.
Sawchuk, 1970, number one, HHOF. So
Yeah.
proud of that. But he was very, very proud about the number retirement.
That
Yeah.
happened in that was in November of 2008 when I think with him and of course Magnuson, who
Yes.
wore number 3 after Pierre, of course, when he had the Blackhawks, he had left the Blackhawks, both numbers, and I'll never forget that night here in Chicago. It was what a send off for both of them, and
Yeah.
that had to be something for the family up here.
Oh yeah, it was great. We of course it was a long time coming, right? And so when it finally did happen, it was like a pretty big relief, a pretty real big honor for him. And so he it was really good. We David, you were there, weren't you?
I was there.
Yeah,
I
we
was
had a
the
lot of fun.
speechwriter.
And it was a lot of fun.
Yes.
It was but just the whole thing, knowing that his jersey's hanging there is really he's really proud of, and of course the whole family is, so
Sure.
yeah, that was a great moment for sure.
I mean, the accomplishments, well deserved. Of course, he was on the 61 team with the Stanley Cup. He's a 3-time Norris winner, probably one of the most consistent defensemen in Blackhawk history. Just, a phenomenal player that can play the offensive side of the puck and the defensive side of the puck. So well deserved. When I was just saying that Chris Chelios, number 7, got retired, of course, they were flashing back to Pierre and Magnuson and Makita and Hall.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it was something a couple of weeks back. How was life, David? How did you see and I, of course, reading on the book, how were the his years after hockey? Did he talk about hockey a lot, or did he talk about what was going on? Did he focus more on his life now?
Well, he focused on his life, but he had the luggage business for a few years. But he always kept busy, and it was always amazing that whenever I started being friends with him and dropping over, he always had a stack of fan mail.
Oh, yes.
Always. And even
Yeah.
up to his last, he was not well at the end, but he was still getting a stack of fan mail, and people would send pictures. Would you sign this? It would be pre-stamped to go back to them, and he would sign it, maybe put a little note. And I never got over the fact that after all those years, he was still getting a stack of fan mail. I mean, it was phenomenal.
Wow.
Yeah, that was good. Well, of course, we found a lot of that stuff after he passed, and we were dealing with the estate. We found all kinds of things, letters, and David, my mother just saved everything.
Yeah.
Everything, like we're talking like the junior beat when she first met him, right?
Oh, wow.
Some junior beat stuff, like a lot of Buffalo Buys and stuff, like these little sticks that they would give out, or in the early days with the Hawks, newspaper clippings, everything, like everywhere they went. It was pretty amazing. We're still dealing with it, but
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, I wanted to mention, his wife Annie was such a special person, and I was trying to search for Litzenberger's name, and a special moment in the book and talking with your mom, Pierre, was when she remembered the night that Litzenberger's wife died.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
And she said, she was talking to me, and actually when Annie was talking to me, her face lit up, and she said, that night we were at the hockey game. There was a game that night, and I could not take my eyes. I think it was Dorothy. I could not take my eyes off of her. And there was just about a glow about her. And between pictures, the wives got together, and there was just a glow about her. I could not understand what it was, but she just glowed. And
Wow.
Yeah.
behold, later that night, she's killed in a car accident. You know,
Mm,
like that was, I sent chills up my spine when I was talking to her.
Yeah.
yeah. That's
That's
it. Well, you
I
know,
have to show you this, Pierre and David. There's that beautiful picture of
yeah,
Yeah,
mom and
Pierre and
dad.
Annie. Yep.
Yeah, and
yeah.
then the caption underneath there is the only time she'd miss a game if she couldn't get a babysitter. And then, of course, the picture on the left is the legendary, of course, Pierre Pilote with Elmer Moose Vasco,
Moose.
who was
Yeah.
also a fan favorite. And you know, and again, Dad, even in the book, complimenting Vasco and so many players, he was just so just incredible. Does he, Pierre? I'll go back to you for a couple last thoughts, and David for a couple last thoughts. How those Blackhawk years? Did he still talk about him as the toward the tail end of his career when the Blackhawks? Was Pierre was basically an ambassador, correct? At the end.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Once the new, once Rocky got there and
Yes.
who McDonough or
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
Rocky and McDonough. You're right on.
yeah. Once that all the bridge was open for him to return back and be part of the whole Hawk experience that they were building, and he really liked it. But of course, he always had the stories. I always heard the stories growing up, whether it might have been a fan like yourself, say,
Sure.
meeting him somewhere in a restaurant or or especially my uncles, my uncle Jill and Flo. Hey, David, when the three
They
of
were
them get
characters.
together and carrying on and talking, it was always a lot of fun. So it was always there. He, once you got to know them, he would know him. He would open up and uh, talk about any of those fond memories. It was good. I was talking to a guy that I coached hockey with. I coached my son years ago with another guy who's a really good hockey player, and I just happened to be talking to him the other night, and he was talking about my dad and saying how much he enjoyed. Like a couple of times, they just went out for a coffee for 2 hours
No.
just to talk about hockey and the stories and stuff like that. So yeah, no, he enjoyed it. He was again, he was looking forward to. But you know what though, by Dave can attest to this. He became a real competitive golf. Golf was his.
Oh wow.
Oh.
Yeah.
I don't know if he won the Stanley Cup of golf. They have this, square off with former players, alumni, right? And they call it the Stanley Cup of golf. And he won it. I don't know if he was more proud of that than the Stanley Cup.
Yeah, right.
He loved to win.
Love to.
yeah,
Right.
yeah, that's right. Yeah. Oh, 100%. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
David, I'll leave you with this. Again, this is a fantastic read. I mean, just a beautiful book. Of course, the Sawchuck book, we had, of course, Terry wasn't around for it, but the way you depicted Sawchuck, him not being here, I thought Sawchuck was there, but this was really all Pierre when you go back and read this. It's fantastic. The later years for you, when was one of the last times you kept in touch with Pierre, correct?
Oh, we would talk weekly. He was at my house, and then he took sick and didn't come over as often. I would go see him, but on the phone twice a week, shooting a breeze. I, Pierre was competitive, and he liked he did like the glory. I remember when he had a bunch of people coming over, and he said he had my fish chowder once, and he said, "Oh, that is really good fish chowder." So he says, "I've got a crew coming over this weekend. Could you make me a pot?" I said, "Sure, I'll make you a pot." So I made a great big pot of it, and I took it over, and just the day before his gang was coming. So then the next day after the event was done, he says, "Oh, they love my fish chowder."
Yeah.
Oh, really? Oh, yeah. That was
Oh,
my
yeah.
Yeah,
I
Yeah.
didn't let on you made it.
and that was
I-
Pierre. That was Pierre with those little subtleties.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I think I heard about that. Yes.
He so he was competitive in golf and but he was a really, really, really we got to be really close, a really good friend. And you know, I saw him the day before he died, and of course, the night he died, I was at a cottage, and Pierre's sister Denise called me. You know, it was the middle of the night, but that was fine because I felt very, very close to Pierre, and I felt close to his family. Um, and he was an amazing character, an amazing hockey player.
Yes.
Uh, I don't know of a hockey player who could not play hockey until 17, who could
Right.
be the
That's
superstar he
amazing.
became.
That's amazing. Yeah,
Absolutely.
I have to ask you how, between the two of you, since 2013, how has the book done over the years and his legend?
Well, his legend is legendary. I mean, he's got
Yeah.
his number up in the rafters, and the book is still on Amazon. It had a limited run, so I can't say it was a sellout. Uh, you know, publishing these days is much different,
Yes.
and so it did very well. And it still sells now and then. But you know, yeah, a glory time for a book is short. You know,
Yes.
there's always the next book, right? So, but Pierre's legend, and I think what Pierre liked about the book, and I think Pierre, you'll agree to this, that he got to see his life from cover to cover,
Yes.
growing up
Well, yes,
till the end,
the thing
and
that he
all
said.
that happened in between.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah,
Fantastic. I want to read something
yeah.
from the back of the book, which I know you guys can see yourselves, but it really is what the David, how you put this in there. Robert Marvin Hall and Stanislav Mikita are the glamour boys of the BlackHawks, and accordingly, Hall and Mikita received the most publicity at that time when they were players with Pierre. However, the mounting evidence indicates that Pilote is and has long been the heart of the team, and this is why this book is called The Heart of the BlackHawks. Gentlemen, I want to thank you tonight for going back in time with me, because that was an era I remember here in Chicago. When I go to that stadium, the United Center now, and I look at the Pilotes and the Mikitas, the Halls, the Magnuson, Glenn Hall, Tony Esposito. It's just something to see those guys, those original guys that were retired, to watch the game now. Even my wife, who's in the other room, probably listening to this, I turn it on for a few minutes and I say, you know what? She's caught me watching an old game from 1968, 1970, and she'll always goes, how was the outcome? I go, they won. It's because it was those, those players. I want to thank you both. Pierre Pilote, thank you. I hope we could do this again. This was fantastic. I hope you enjoyed it. And David.
Yes.
You know what? We're gonna have to run and do our own podcast one day.
I think so.
I want to thank you, and thanks David for writing the book. Really, for putting
fantastic,
it in print.
fantastic.
And moving all that furniture.
Yeah, moving all the furniture. Is the book still available, David?
Absolutely. It's still on Amazon, and you can still purchase it there for sure.
Great.
Yes.
Gentlemen, good night.
Thanks,
and
David.
thank you.
Thanks a lot,
Relive
John.
Pierre Pilote. Truly
Thanks.
the heart of the Chicago
Thank you.
Blackhawks.
Thank you, John.
Good night, everyone. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.